never launched a frontal attack until they reached Budapest and then Berlin. Never a frontal attack. They would always use a pincer movement, surround a city and then race ahead and let the garrison stew in its impotence, and eventually some forces, rare forces would arrive and clean up the garrison. What kind of men were they who sent children to their deaths? Well, they were really noblemen. Let me tell you about the commander-in-chief, what kind of a human being he was. General Bur was his code name. His name was Count Tadeusz Komorowski. He was an extraordinary man, a brave man, highly decorated veteran, heavily wounded in the Polish Bolshevik War. He performed feats of bravery in that war. And then he was a gentleman, an equestrian. He did very well in the Berlin Olympics. He actually knew his counterparts. They didn't know who he was. He knew the counterparts because he rode against them as an equestrian. And he was a very decent man. He was asked after the uprising, that was in London, why didn't you inform your pregnant wife, who was with your 3-year-old son and a baby in her belly, about the uprising? You could have evacuated her. And he said, there were very many pregnant women in Warsaw. I couldn't have possibly told everybody. These were feudal men, honorable men. They were facing totalitarians, Hitler and Stalin. They were from a different civilization and a different world. They were very righteous human beings, not fit to face the totalitarians. And face them they did, despite all the odds. What was the objective of the Soviets? Whereas the Poles wanted to self-liberate, the Soviets wanted to conquer as much Europe as possible. Once again, not to liberate anybody. Not if you're interested in the Soviet liberation, you can look things up at the U.S. Holocaust Memorial Museum. When the Soviets arrived, for example, at Theresienstadt, the Soviet troops raped some surviving Jewish women. Why? Because they were raping everybody. They didn't come to liberate anyone, in particular not Jews. Their orders were to march and get as much Europe as possible. That was the objective. And from the tactical point of view was to outflank Warsaw and to disarm the Poles and ship them off to the Gulag, the Home Army in particular. What about the Western Allies? Well, the Western Allies did whatever Stalin said. And there was a trickling of airdrops. Just a little bit, nothing sufficient. And I'd say 85% of everything that was airdropped in Warsaw fell into German hands. So it was insufficient, and it was a betrayal of the Allied. It took the Allied to the Americans and the British to pronounce publicly to the world that the Poles were combatants. So the Germans were shooting, the Nazis were shooting, not only the insurgents, but everybody. And what was the objective of the Germans? Kill everyone and level the city. After about a week, they stopped killing everyone because they were running out of ammunition. And it was very inefficient, you know, you have to go block by block, kill everybody, and then move on. So it was slowing the troops down. It took them 63 days. This is a gruesome affair. It's inspiring for the kids now, and it'll continue to be in the foreseeable future, but it is really a horrific affair. city was a city of 1 million people in the middle of Europe, an allied city. Now the Americans had no plans to liberate Paris. But once there was an uprising in Paris, General Patton and Eisenhower released Leclerc's division, which raised armored division to help the insurgents in Paris. Nothing comparable in the East. In the East, one occupation was replaced with another. Hitler was stuck. And because for half or until this very day, in the West there applies the Allied scheme of victory, that there was Uncle Joe. The story, to a large extent, despite heroic, valiant efforts of the likes of Alexandra Ritchie, and now, and a few years ago, Norman Davies, and before that, J.K. Zawodny, the story is not known. Almost everybody knows about the Warsaw Ghetto Uprising, which was a very bloody episode, suppression of the slaughter of the remnants of the Jewish population in the ghetto. But here's an entire Allied town disappeared. It was depopulated. The Soviets took half a year before they moved, because Hitler was doing their job, the Nazis were doing their job for them. Thank you very much.